Will you guide us to the settlement? She whispered. The homesteader met her gaze. On the condition you vow to return here when it's done. Wyoming Territory, the last chill of fall, 1889. The gale outside had a bite to it, sharp enough to seep through the logs of the old Miller homestead. Elias Miller, a man of 40 winters, woke not from a dream, but from a noise. A dull thud. Then the subtle groan of wood under pressure. He sat up, senses sharp. The barn talked in its sleep often, but this sound was foreign. Purposeful. Too quiet for the weather, too deliberate to ignore. In silence, his hand found the kerosene lamp on the stand. A match flared. His Colt rested in its holster, slung over the bedpost. He secured it, pulled on his coat and boots, and moved into the heart of the house. The floorboards sighed under his weight as he stepped out into the bitter night. The world was a void. Thick clouds smothered the moon and stars. A dry rustle moved through the dead grass. His lamp cut a frail path through the dark. Elias followed the disturbance around the side of the grain store, his steps crunching on frozen earth. As he rounded the corner, the light found them. A woman, hunched beside a crude wooden handcart. Her dark hair was plastered to her skin by the wet. Her coat was threadbare, the cuffs frayed. Her fingers were tight on one of 3 small, sealed boxes. Behind her stood 2 children, a girl no more than 6, and a boy perhaps 10. Both were swaddled in thin blankets, their eyes wide, faces raw from the cold. Elias halted a few steps away, lifting the light. "State your business," he said, his voice low but carrying. The woman didn't cower. She looked at him with a calm, exhausted steadiness. "Will you guide us to the settlement?" The question hung in the frigid air. Elias looked past her to the crates, then to the silent children. Their quiet was not fear, but habit. He met her eyes again. "The town is 5 miles in this darkness. You intend to walk?" "We did," she replied, her voice soft. He studied her. She held her ground, neither asking for mercy nor offering threat. A woman fleeing, perhaps, but no criminal. Not with the way her hand came to rest on the boy's shoulder. Not with the way she watched the girl as the wind tugged at her blanket. Elias stepped closer, lowering the lantern. "What's in those boxes?" "All that was worth carrying," she said. "That's my answer for now." He looked from her to the children and the cart's wobbly wheels. After a long silence, he gave a single nod. "On the condition you vow to return here when it's done." The woman blinked, as if the word, "here," was a language she'd forgotten. But she didn't protest. She inclined her head once. "I am Clara. Elias Miller." He moved past her and took the cart's handle. Without another word, he lifted and turned back toward the house. The children fell in step. Clara followed at the rear. Inside, he built up the fire and put a pot on to boil. He asked no questions. She gave no explanations. The children curled up near the hearth, soundless. Clara sat on the edge of a chair, her hands knotted in her lap. Her eyes traced the room, the shelves, the walls, the rifle leaning by the door. "I'll take you at sunrise," Elias said finally. She looked at him. "Thank you." He leaned against the stone mantel, arms crossed. "You carry secrets, Miss Clara. But if you're fleeing a fire, 5 miles in the dark is better than burning." Clara gave the slightest nod, her voice a whisper. "Then I thank you for not asking about the flames." Elias watched her a moment longer, then turned to the window. Outside, the wind screamed, but inside, a stillness had taken root. For the first time in years, his house held strangers. But it didn't feel like an invasion. It felt like a beginning. The wagon axles complained under the weight of the quiet. A sliver of moon peered through the clouds like a wary sentinel. Elias sat straight on the bench, the reins held loosely in one gloved hand, the other holding the lantern that illuminated their path. Clara sat beside him, wrapped in a thick horse blanket he'd fetched from the stable. Her posture was rigid, her eyes fixed ahead, speaking volumes in her silence. The 2 children, Samuel and Lily, were tucked in the wagon bed, nestled among old sacks. They had drifted into sleep, their breathing shallow and even. The cold needled his cheeks, but the quiet was a heavier burden. The kind of quiet that made a man ponder what tempest was brewing behind it. He was the one to break it. "The children's father," he ventured, his tone even. Clara's gaze didn't leave the road. "Gone." Elias nodded slowly. "A blessing, if he was the cause." She said nothing more. The finality in her tone was a locked door. They rode on, the lantern painting shifting phantoms on the trees. The forest crowded in places, branches scraping at the sky like skeletal arms. But Elias kept the team steady, his face a mask. When the first distant glimmers of town life twinkled in the valley's belly, he slowed the horses near a curve where a half-frozen creek gurgled. "We'll rest a moment," he said, drawing the team to a halt. Clara nodded mutely. He climbed down first, checked the horses, then stepped away to stretch his legs. Clara remained seated for a long minute before she, too, stepped down. She knelt by the stream, splashing icy water on her face, releasing a slow, weary breath. The lantern's flicker caught the fine lines of strain on her face. She moved to the back of the wagon. Elias didn't follow, but his eyes tracked her. Clara lifted the lid of one crate. The wood groaned softly. Inside were papers, a faded journal, a passport, a cloth bag gaping to show a glint of coin, and a folder edged with names written in a careful script. She pulled it up just enough to see the first page. Her fingers lingered. Then she stilled, sensing his attention. Without a word, she closed the crate and fastened the latch. "I am not a thief," she stated, soft yet firm. "These belong to me, or to those who were robbed of their chance to hold on to them." Elias didn't respond at once. He moved closer, his look unwavering. "I didn't speak. You thought it. I think many things," he said. "But none matter more than those two children sleeping there. You're hauling a weight heavier than timber, Clara. I can see it in the set of your shoulders." She looked toward the wagon, then back at him. "I only need a few days to finish what was started. After that, I'll vanish if I must." Elias shook his head. "We'll see what the dawn brings." He helped her back onto the seat. For a heartbeat, her eyes held his, the look guarded but not cold. The wagon rolled on, its wheels turning over stone and recollection. Behind them, the trees murmured secrets only the darkness understood, and ahead, the town waited with lights that flickered like half-truths yet to be revealed. The settlement of Bitter Creek was just stirring when Elias guided the wagon down its main thoroughfare. Lamplight glowed in a few windows, the blacksmith's shop was still dark. Elias pulled the reins, stopping before a small chapel with a white steeple piercing the morning haze. "We start here," he said, stepping down. Clara followed, her movements cautious. Her eyes scanned the quiet street, alert and uneasy. "Wait here," Elias told her, then knocked on the chapel door. It opened promptly. Reverend Josiah Pike stood there, a lean man with sharp eyes and gray hair. His stern expression softened at the sight of Elias. "Well, now, you bringing me souls in need of saving?" "Just a soul in need of shelter," Elias replied. The Reverend stepped aside. "Bring them in." Clara hesitated, then lifted one of the wooden crates and entered. Pike watched her, then moved to assist. "I carry my own burdens," she said. They set the crate down near a pew. Clara opened it. Inside, official-looking papers, bank notes, letters. Pike's brow furrowed. "You need this concealed." Clara nodded. "From a law that isn't just." Pike touched the lid. "It will be safe." They departed soon after. Elias secured a room at the boarding house, paying for one in the back, away from prying eyes. The children still slept. Clara turned to him. "There is someone I must see." "Who?" "The marshal." Elias frowned. "That's a risk." "No," she said. "It's necessary." He didn't contest it. "I'll be close by." The marshal's office was 2 blocks over. Clara walked alone, her head high. Elias waited across the street, watching. She entered without a backward glance. The hours dragged. Noon came and went. She did not reappear. Elias was about to cross the road when she finally emerged. Clara's shawl was pulled tight, her steps measured. Elias reached her quickly. "What happened?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she pushed her sleeve back slightly. A deep, angry bruise stained her forearm. He went rigid. "Clara, do you want me to go in there?" She shook her head. "They want terror. I will not supply it." She looked like someone who had endured far worse. "I gave him a piece of the truth," she added. "Enough to make him nervous." "Did he believe you?" "He already knew. He just needed to show me the price of speaking." They walked back without a word. Fallen leaves skittered across the boardwalk. At the boarding house, the children were awake. Lily ran to Clara's arms. Samuel lingered by the wall, his eyes on Elias. Clara held Lily close and met Elias's gaze. "We're going to need more than hope." "You have more than that," she said. "You have me." She didn't smile, but a tension left her frame. In that small room, as the light outside began to fail, the atmosphere changed. The bruise on Clara's arm was only the start. The crates held evidence, but the burden she carried within was far greater, and the true battle was still on the horizon. The journey back to the ranch was hushed. Clara sat beside Elias, her expression unreadable. The children slept in the back, their small forms curled together. The town's lights faded behind them, but the encounter with the marshal lingered like a stain. Back at the homestead, Clara moved like a ghost. She spoke little, saving her words for the children. Lily clung to her. Samuel was her shadow. Elias observed it all, but pressed for nothing. Not then. That evening, a breeze whispered through the pines. Elias went out to check on the livestock. He found her on the porch steps, a lantern at her side, its light tracing the weariness on her face. She didn't startle. He sat beside her. For a long while, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "You asked why I ran. I'll tell you, but not for your sympathy." Elias remained motionless. "I was raised in Georgia, married young. Arthur Vance had everyone's admiration. Wealth, charm, a generous smile for the public. He funded charities, built schools. But in private, he was constructing something monstrous." She drew a shaky breath. "I managed the accounts. That was my skill. He let me see only what he wished, until I opened the wrong ledger." She turned to him. "False names, wire transfers. Money funneled through charities and banks to men operating retreats. They weren't retreats. They were prisons for women and girls, the poor, the unwanted. Hidden away." Her voice caught. "One route passed just north of here. I found the map. Marked locations, cabins where women vanished." She faltered. "I took what I could. Files, records, photographs. I took Samuel, my son, and Lily." Her voice broke. "Lily's mother was one of them. She begged me with her last breath. I couldn't leave the child." From her coat, she produced a folded paper and handed it to him. 12 names, ages, hastily written notes. 5 are confirmed dead, she whispered. 2 disappeared this past year. 1. Alara Jensen, worked the orchards near here. You knew her. Elias read the list. He remembered Alara, bright and kind, gone without a trace. He folded the paper. "Why haven't they jailed you?" "Because I haven't gone quiet," Clara answered. "If I disappear before I testify, before a court sees the proof, it all dies with me. They don't need my death. They only need my silence." A sound pierced the night, hoofbeats, rapid, then fading. Elias stood swiftly, hand going to his revolver. "That wasn't one of ours." He stepped off the porch, peering into the treeline. "If they return, I won't be asking questions." Clara rose and went inside. She returned with one of the wooden boxes, setting it between them on the porch and opening it. Inside, photographs of women with weary eyes, a hand-drawn map circled in red ink, bundles of letters, all still sealed. Elias looked from the contents to her. "We'll keep these secure," he said. "And we'll keep you secure, you and those children." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I've never trusted a man with a gun," she said softly. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid of yours." Elias kept his eyes on the woods, but his voice was solid. "Good. Because I've got enough rounds to ensure the next man who rides up here won't get a second look." A week slipped by under the pale autumn sun. Elias rode out alone at first light, taking a long route to where the telegraph stage passed. Disguised, he sent copies of Clara's documents to a contact in Cheyenne, a former Pinkerton man who owed him. He used no names, only an old symbol they recognized, a hawk in flight. At the ranch, a fragile routine took hold. Clara mended fences and baked bread. Samuel practiced with a lasso. Lily learned to lead a calf around the pen. Their laughter, when it came, was a cautious, precious sound. One morning, as Elias split wood, a rider appeared on the trail. Tall, expensive boots, black gloves, Lucian vein. He rode in with an easy arrogance, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elias straightened, axe in hand. Lucian dismounted smoothly, brushing dust from his sleeve. His gaze found Clara on the porch, Samuel behind her. "Well, now," he drawled. "Sister-in-law, it's been a long chase." Clara's face hardened. "What do you want, Lucian?" He stepped closer, boots crunching. "Just came to collect some property my late brother failed to pass on." "You left in quite a hurry. Thought you might have taken something that isn't yours." Elias moved between them. "She has nothing for you." Lucian tilted his head. Playing the protector, Miller. You always did have a soft spot for strays. I don't play. Neither man moved. Then Lucien's smile widened. You know, all it takes is one wire to the marshal, and this peaceful little scene turns into a nightmare. You're not in the city. Out here, people vanish. No one asks too many questions. He turned and mounted his horse, still calm. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll give her 2 days to see sense. After that, this stops being a request. He rode off into the pines. That night, Elias placed his rifle by the bed. He checked every window, every door, every latch. He did not sleep. Clara didn't either. She sat at the kitchen table long into the night, a single candle burning down, writing letters, one for Samuel, one for Lily, tucking them into a drawer. Just in case. By morning, a plan was formed. They would depart, not to flee, but to confront. Clara would take the evidence to a federal judge in Stone Ridge, a larger town 2 days' ride east, beyond Vane's immediate reach. They packed light. Troy prepared the horses. The children asked little, perhaps they understood. As Clara tightened the final saddlebag, Elias stood nearby. Quiet. At last, he said, if you leave, I'm not certain what reason I'll have to open that gate each morning. Clara looked up, her eyes clear and resolute. I'm not running, Elias. I'm going to end this. I'll return, if the door is still open. He didn't speak, but he reached for her hand, his work-roughened fingers closing around hers, holding on long enough for the pledge to take root between them. The town of Stone Ridge hummed with the tense energy of a place holding its breath. The courthouse stood formidable at the end of the main street. Clara and Elias arrived as the sun crested the hills. The children were left with a friend on the outskirts. Clara wore a simple dress, her hair neatly tied. Elias walked beside her, a silent sentinel. Inside, they presented the documents to a clerk, who led them to a private chamber. Judge Horace Blackwood waited, an older man with weary but intelligent eyes. Clara laid the box before him. I have names, ledgers, records of fraudulent contracts. These women are missing, some are dead. Blackwood lifted a page, his eyebrows rising. Where did you get these? They were my husband's. I took them when I fled. Before he could say more, the door opened. Lucian Vane entered, impeccably dressed. Behind him stood a federal marshal with a polished badge. Your Honor, Lucian began smoothly. A pardon for the interruption, but there's been a terrible error. This woman is unstable. She fled her home, stole private documents, and has constructed these fantasies. She hasn't been well. Clara's jaw tightened. Elias shifted forward, but Clara placed a hand on his arm. I am not unwell. I am a witness. Blackwood studied them both, the papers in his hand. Do you have any identification, Mrs. Vance? Clara's voice wavered. No. It was lost when I escaped. Lucian offered a thin smile. Convenient. The marshal nodded. She's wanted for theft in 2 territories. It's been formally filed. For a moment, the room was silent. Judge Blackwood slowly turned the pages, his frown deepening. Then he set them down. This is not a trial, Mr. Vane. I am making no rulings today. These are grave allegations and they warrant examination. He turned to the clerk. Log the contents. A hearing is set for 3 days hence. Lucian stiffened. Your Honor. My courtroom, Blackwood interrupted. You'll have your say in 3 days. Outside, the air felt thin. Elias didn't speak until they were away from the courthouse. He outmaneuvered us. Had the papers ready. Clara nodded, shaken but firm. He wants the truth buried, and me along with it. They didn't wait. By dusk, they were riding hard toward the freight district, to an old warehouse owned by Silas Grant, a former cavalry scout and one of Elias's trusted allies. Silas met them with a lantern and supplies. You won't be found here, he said gruffly. Not immediately. They settled in, Elias pacing, Clara trying to steady her nerves. The children slept on a pile of empty grain sacks. Outside, the wind moaned. On the loading dock, Clara stood beside Elias. He leaned against a post, arms crossed. I brought you into this, he said after a long silence. But I need to hear it once more. Clara turned to him, the moonlight soft on her face. You need me to promise I'll return. His voice was low. No, I need to know you want to. She took his hand, her fingers cold. I do. But a promise isn't necessary anymore. She smiled, tired but fierce. My heart has been home for a while now. The night pressed down on the warehouse, cold and dense. Clara had been inside less than an hour when Elias left, vowing to return swiftly with provisions. He never came back on time. When the second hour passed, a cold dread seized her. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she took the small derringer from her bag and stepped into the darkness. She found him near the old water tower, slumped against a stack of railroad ties. His right side was dark with blood, his teeth gritted against the pain. Signs of a struggle were everywhere. Clara dropped to her knees. "Elias," she breathed. He opened one eye. "You're early. You're shot." Noticed that. Clara scanned the shadows. Empty. But the name Lucian Vane echoed in her mind. She helped him stand, taking his weight onto her shoulders. It took every ounce of her strength to get him back to the warehouse and onto their makeshift bed. She cut away his shirt, revealing the ugly gash along his ribs. Her hands trembled as she cleaned the wound with whiskey. Elias made no sound, but his body went rigid. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, pressing a clean cloth to the bleeding. "This is my fault. I brought this violence to your door." Elias exhaled, a strained sound. "No, you didn't." He caught her bloody hand. "You're not the storm, Clara. You're the anchor that finally held fast in all this chaos." Tears filled her eyes. "You're saying pretty words while you're bleeding out." His lips twitched. "My timing's always been poor." She tried to laugh, but it was a sob. His gaze found hers in the dim light. "You didn't bring violence," he whispered. "You brought meaning. Brought something worth fighting for." She knelt, wiping his brow with a trembling hand. Her voice was a breath. "All this time, I've just been running from things. From men. From myself." Elias blinked slowly. Then stopped. She leaned in, her forehead touching his. "I'm done running." Her lips met his. It wasn't a desperate kiss, but a solid one. An affirmation. He returned it not with passion, but with a profound understanding, as if this moment had been waiting for its true significance. When she pulled back, her hand rested over his heart. "No matter what it takes," she vowed, "I will drag it all into the light. The names, the lies, all of it." Elias's fingers brushed hers. "And when it's done," she looked down at him, wounded but watching her as if she were the only truth left. "If there's still a place I can call home," she said, her voice low and clear, "it's wherever you are." Outside, the wind rose, scattering dust. A train whistle cried in the distance. But in that dim corner of the warehouse, something had settled, something immovable. The spring breeze was gentle as it moved through the Miller homestead, rustling the new shoots in the garden Clara had planted. The air was rich with the scent of turned earth and renewal. 3 months had passed since the hearing. Lucian Vane was in custody, facing charges of conspiracy and fraud. The evidence Elias had sent to Cheyenne had done its work, corroborating the testimony of other witnesses who found their courage. Clara's voice in the courtroom had been steady, unshakable. She did not go back to Georgia. There was nothing for her there. Clara stayed. The room upstairs was hers, though it was simply part of the home now, as she was. The children, Lily and Samuel, slept soundly in the room next door, their laughter a constant melody around the yard. Elias had filed the paperwork. A judge had signed it. He was their father now, in all the ways that mattered. Clara tended her garden in the mornings. In the evenings, she wrote in an old ledger, filling it with the stories of the women who had been lost, ensuring they would be remembered. On a quiet afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows from the barn, Clara stepped onto the porch where Elias was mending a harness. She stood for a long moment, then said softly, "Will you guide us to the settlement?" Elias looked up, a slow smile gracing his weathered face. "On the condition you vow to return here when it's done." Before she could answer, Lily dashed out the door, grabbing Clara's hand. "Can we ride up front with you?" she pleaded. Samuel followed, pulling on his boots. "I get to hold the reins." Elias stood, brushing off his pants. "You'll both ride in the back," he said. "The road to town is too rough for games. But it's smoother when she rides with you," Lily insisted, pointing at Clara. He paused, his gaze settling on the woman beside him. "I suppose we'll just have to smooth the road ourselves, then," he said, leading them to the wagon. The ride to town was peaceful, the horses walking steadily through the swaying grass. Clara sat beside Elias, the wind playing with loose strands of her hair. She glanced back once. The ranch receded into the landscape, swallowed by the rolling hills. But it didn't feel like a farewell. She touched the wide brim of the hat she wore, his hat, once, given to her on that first, fateful ride. I used to believe home was a place you could lose, she murmured. Elias glanced sideways. And now? She smiled, her eyes on the distant homestead. Now I know it's the place someone waits for you to return. If this story of quiet courage and a love forged in hardship found a place in your heart, please show your support by liking this video. It helps the channel Winds of Thought continue sharing these untold tales of the human spirit. For more journeys through forgotten histories and the resilience of love, subscribe to Winds of Thought. We have more stories waiting, and the next one could be the one that stays with you. Until then, travel safe, and remember the way back.